Welcome to Fast Keto. I'm your host, Ketogenic Girl. Did you know that you actually have the option to either be a sugar burner or a fat burner? It's called having a metabolic advantage, as Dr. Ben Beekman would put it. You can actually burn your own stored body fat for fuel. On this show, we talk about ketogenesis, fasting, biohacking, all with the goal of optimal body composition for longevity and having the highest possible quality of life. I hope you enjoy these interviews and solo casts that I present to you, all with this goal in mind. Hey guys, welcome back to Fast Keto. I am so pumped about this episode, which is with Siim. He is a biohacker who lives in Estonia. He's an author, speaker, and content creator, and he just wrote a book all about fasting and autophagy, and it is called Metabolic Adaptation, and he talks a lot about optimizing nutrition, health, performance, and well-being with different biohacking techniques. And his book is all about intermittent fasting for longevity and muscle growth. And he has a fantastic YouTube channel. You have to check it out, where he does these amazing videos, and all of his podcasts are super fun to watch. They're really animated, and he just does really cool editing. I was on his podcast, I think maybe half a year ago or so, and I was just so amazed by the job he did editing this thing. It looks so cool, but he is full of knowledge on autophagy, having really researched this book in depth. And today we talk all about autophagy, fasting for autophagy, the benefits, different ways of applying it, doing intermittent fasting, his daily routine, having a time restricted window during the day, how many times he fasts throughout the year, and what kind of the optimal fasting range can be for people. And we also talk about some of the drawbacks to extended fasting, over fasting, and over triggering autophagy, and how there can be some negatives to that as well, which I find fascinating. So we had a really great chat today. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I got getting to record it. And here is the episode with Siim. Welcome, Robin. It's so great to have you back here on Fast Keto. How is it going for you right now?
Good morning. Everything is really super busy, but great.
I am so excited. I had the time of my life there last year. I like to say it's Disney for keto adults.
It is a lot of fun.
Yeah. So what can people expect from attending an event like this?
So KetoCon is a 3-day event. So what they can expect is a mixture of science and stories. And that's why we've coined the event KetoCon. So we have, I would say, about 25% of the speakers at KetoCon are medical professionals. And they talk about varied topics. We have cardiologists. We have specialists that are doing research in cancer. We have hormonal specialists, gynecologists, a wide variety of medical professionals. We even have one doctor that specializes in psychiatry. We have a lot of speakers that talk about the fitness side of the ketogenic diet and lifestyle, and weight training, heart fitness. And we have another large group of people that are part of the stories part of KetoCon, and really inspiring stuff. So from the speakers and the presentation side, we have 37 speakers this year, and there are 3 different stages. So we have a main stage in the exhibitor hall, and we have 2 breakout rooms on the second floor of the event hall, where we also have presentations going on all at the same time. So it's jam-packed with learning. And then the other side of it is the fun side, because, like you said, Disney for keto adults. So that's a lot of fun, sampling food and trying out new technology. And I got to say that even though all of that is really awesome, the most fulfilling part of KetoCon for me personally is that I see we have people traveling from, as you know, because you're doing this too, from all over the world to attend this event. And these are usually people that know each other online, but don't get to meet until they actually all come to an event like this. So we've built this really inspiring and all-inclusive type of community where people come from all over the world to meet their online buddies that they've been talking to for a year or 2 or 3 related to keto. So it becomes more of like a a love fest.
It absolutely is a love fest. And I just love being there and seeing so many people connecting and going, "You're so and so. Oh my goodness." And so many hugs and, just so many joyful meetings of people who've been, like you said, connecting for a while and sharing online, and getting to hang out in person is so different and so much more fun and exciting. But tell us about some of the growth that KetoCon's had.
We're on year 3 now. The first year we did this, we had about 550 people at the event, and a total of, I think we had 39 or 35 exhibitors. Then in year 2, we had 850 people, maybe a little bit more, and 79 exhibitors. Well, this year, and we still have 2 weeks to go, we have 2,500 people and 115 exhibitors.
That's incredible.
I
That's
know.
really amazing. And I can only imagine how much more fun and just, enjoyable the whole event's going to be, having that many people in the community coming out, and joining. And I love some of the features, like you said, just being able to walk through the event and sample all the amazing food and dry farm wines. And, you guys do such a great job of getting really great vendors in there.
That is a challenge, I got to tell you. So we turned a lot of people away this year because we do have a banned ingredient list, and it's really important to us that the companies that are exhibiting at KetoCon represent what we believe to be the most beneficial ingredient and macro profile for products. And we follow Finney and Volek's recommendations on that side. But on the ingredient side, we are strict about it. We have a banned ingredient list, and if your products contain those ingredients, you cannot exhibit at KetoCon. We want to get rid of that. There are certain ingredients that are not what's best for your health, and even though it says keto on the package, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you guys have really high standards, and it just makes it so great to be able to walk around and know that the vendors and the food there, are all, they've kind of gone through your, checking, double checking. And like you said, just because it says keto on the package doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be benefiting your body. So
Right.
that's really, I'm really excited about the brisket and all the great eating that we get
Did you
together.
go to Terry Black's last year?
Actually, Sean Minar brought me a slice of it because I missed out, and I was like, I'm definitely go there this time. There were a lot of lines and stuff about that every time I wanted to go, but I'll figure out how to finagle my way in there, because there's just not enough brisket places here in Prague. So I'm going to definitely get my fill. What are some of the other extracurricular activities that you guys have planned?
We have some new stuff this year. So on Saturday morning, this is not new, but we have an entrepreneur session on Saturday morning, which has a panel of 7 speakers, and these are all individuals that are successful entrepreneurs. And they will be talking to the audience about what they do, how they grew to where they are, and what their long-term goals are as far as growth goes. And then we open it up to the room for the attendees to ask their specific questions about either starting a new business or expanding their current business, whatever challenges they're having. That has turned out to be extremely popular. Last year we had 50 people there. This year we have 150 people there. So that one's going to be jam-packed. That's very early Saturday morning. Also on Saturday and Sunday morning, there's a yoga class from 7 to 8 o'clock that's held inside the exhibitor hall. And then on Saturday night, new for this year, we have a jazz concert / social mixer taking place from 7 to 9 o'clock on the second floor of the Palmer Event Center. So there'll be a bar there. There'll be some food samples from some of our exhibitors. We hired a small band to play some music, and really just an opportunity for people to kind of network, have a drink, relax together. And then each day, well, I should say Friday and Saturday, the speakers, rather than having speakers go until 6:30 at night every night, the speakers and the panels will finish by 4 o'clock. And then from 4 to 6:30 on Friday and Saturday, the exhibitors are going to be holding special events in their booths. So there'll be all kinds of giveaways and sales and contests and activities taking place on the exhibitor floor. That will be going on Saturday night. Then one of the other things that we've done this year to make things a little bit more exciting for people, we have planned a scavenger hunt. And it's nothing too elaborate, but it should be a lot of fun. We have a list of 10 items that each person would need to acquire in order to win a small prize. And then there's an opportunity to win, for each person to win 10 of these throughout the course of the event by doing one of each of those 10 things. So that should be a lot of fun, and we're hoping that it will generate some excitement.
That's so fun. I love scavenger hunts. What a great idea.
Yeah, we think it'll be a lot of fun. And then the last thing, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Vinny Tortorich is speaking at KetoCon this year.
Mm-hmm.
Vinny is the founder of No Sugar, No Grains. He's written a few books, and he recently completed the production of a documentary called Fat, the documentary. And he will be playing part of that film during KetoCon. So we're super excited to have that, because everybody's been biting at the bit to see pieces of it. I don't know about you, but I mean, Vinny was one of the first people that I followed during my own personal journey into keto.
That's so cool. How fun to watch a movie together. And I've been anxiously awaiting his film to come out. So how cool that we can all watch it there together. That's great.
And we also have, a little, this is new, but I think that it's a result of trends. But, we have several speakers at KetoCon this year that are doing their own personal research and research with patients that focuses on an elimination protocol and more on the keto carnivore side of things, as opposed to just low carb or just keto.
Yeah, well, I am so pumped to be there. I can't wait to see you, see everyone from the community. And I really appreciate all the time and effort that you put into this, because, I know how much work goes into putting on events, and it's really a tireless marathon, and, you're soon going to get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So thank you for all that you do to put this on for all of us. And I really am so excited to be there.
Me too. I'm looking forward to seeing you as well.
Great. Well, where can everyone find more information about KetoCon and get their tickets if they haven't gotten them yet?
So the best place to find information about KetoCon is at ketocon.org. It's our website. That's where you can get tickets. The event information about the event is on the website. The final expanded schedule of events is going up this week, and you can find information about all of the speakers. You can find information about tickets to all of the different things that are going on. The other place to get great information would be to follow us on Facebook. We have a KetoCon page and a KetoCon group on Facebook, and then we also have a KetoCon account on Instagram that is pretty active as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Robin, and for sharing all this great insight into what people can expect at KetoCon. I know it's going to be a fantastic event.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show, Siim. It's so great to have you here. How are you doing today?
Hey, Vanessa. It's good to be on the show, and I'm glad to talk with you again.
Yeah, it's so cool that, we got to meet in Helsinki at the Biohackers conference, and I remember you interviewed me there, and it's been really cool to get to know you and see some of your work. And you just released this brand new book, which I just have my copy in front of me, and it looks fantastic. So what inspired you to write Metabolic Autophagy?
Well, I've been doing this sort of intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating for over 7 to 8 years, and over this time I've just kind of refined different methods for doing it, and I kind of used it to optimize both body composition, improve health, and just increase mental productivity and performance as well. So I've been just it was just kind of interesting to see how intermittent fasting had become more and more popular, and especially with the kind of emergence of this popularity in the word autophagy, which is like a process of self-eating, and it's like your cells are recycling themselves and taking out these old and dysfunctional parts. So with that, I was just going to be kind of wanted to put together this book because there were also like a lot of misconceptions about both fasting as well as autophagy, and at the same time, I was like already gathered so much knowledge about it and different like blog posts and articles. So I was like I would do like a disservice to other people if I didn't write something about it. So yeah, I decided to kind of put it together over the course of the book itself was written like within a few months, but the kind of research was gathered over the course of like several years.
That's really cool. And what is it about autophagy that you find so interesting?
Well, the word itself is also quite fascinating because it does describe essentially your body's own survival mechanism. And naturally, autophagy is upregulated when you're exposed to different kinds of stressors, and most primarily like nutritional stressors and energy deficiencies. So that's when your body is going to kind of detect that, okay, we don't have access to an abundance of energy, and therefore we need to start recycling the things that we do have and to go into our own backup stores. So that's why there's quite a lot of literature showing how this process of recycling is central to many of the longevity boosting benefits from caloric restriction as well as general vitality and longevity. For instance, like if you do block out autophagy in genetically modified mice, then those mice they're not going to live longer despite being fed fewer calories. Whereas if they are able to have enough autophagy when under caloric restriction, then they're still going to live longer. So it's kind of critical component, so to say. So some longevity gurus say that you can live longer if you eat fewer calories, but they kind of miss the point that it's autophagy that's making those benefits happen. So you can actually activate autophagy without essentially starving yourself and without putting yourself through these long periods of malnourishment and caloric restriction, so to say. So you can kind of hack it with clever meal timing and some periods of intermittent fasting. And there are like many other benefits to autophagy as well, such as like you need autophagy to start producing ketone bodies and to get into ketosis and essentially, as well as like fighting cardiovascular disease or preventing it, protecting against it. And like when you're like experiencing neurodegeneration, then autophagy can also help to clear out the plaque formation in your brain. So yeah, like I'm kind of surprised to see that there almost isn't anything that doesn't benefit from autophagy, and it's also like a very almost like a central part to healthy physiological functioning and healthy cellular functioning.
Isn't it amazing that our cells have their very own built-in like recycling center inside them? I mean, just looking at that when I was studying biochemistry this fall, like looking at the actual processes of it with the
Mm.
macrophages and how like they kind of absorb it and the lysosomes, like how they all work and take it down in there, and they break down these incorrectly folded proteins and they break them down into their essential amino acids and they build new ones. Like
Mm.
they don't even waste them. They just break down the incorrectly folded ones and reuse them. Like that's amazing.
Yeah, it is like your body has all the kind of tools it needs. It's just that we kind of get in our own way with bad nutrition advice and poor eating habits. So like you're supposed to be going through autophagy all the time almost, and like if you're eating, let's say, a very ancestral diet, then you would have like quite a higher levels of basal autophagy happening almost all the time. But the problem is that if people are eating too frequently and they're like over consuming calories plus carbs and other like inflammatory foods, then they're essentially blocking that from happening. And yeah, this kind of such a huge shame in the sense that the autophagy is almost like a self-healing process, but it's we don't really, or like most people don't really tap into it, and it's like at our fingertips all the time, the magic of healing.
Yes, absolutely. And I love the way you put that because I always talk about how we have this innate ability to be metabolically flexible, and yet most people never even access their own ability to burn stored fat. And I love how you're putting that as, we all have this ability to have this basal autophagy happening, and yet the things that we're doing are just preventing that natural process from happening. And it's built into us, and yet we're like preventing it from actually taking place.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
I love that. So what drew you to health in the first place? Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone who hasn't heard of you before, and, who you are kind of as a biohacker in this space, and what brought you to all of this.
Well, yeah, I've been doing, let's say, biohacking or health optimization for about, let's say, yeah, 5 to 7 years or something. And I started off with general fitness and body composition, trying to build muscle and get stronger, etc. But then I kind of just realized that your health is much more important than just vanity and not just hitting certain numbers at a gym. So I've always kind of been able to bridge the gap between health and performance, because sometimes most people tend to gravitate towards one or the other and they don't really achieve both. So I've been always trying to find this balance between being still able to perform at my peak without sacrificing my health. And I think that's one of the main problems with the biohacking culture as well, or like just high performance culture, where everything is like go go go, hustle, and don't sleep, take all these different smart drugs, and drink a bunch of caffeine. The problem is that it's not that sustainable. So I've always wanted to be more towards the sustainable approach, because it's like you're gonna play for the long term, and you don't end up regretting anything. So I've been doing my own blog for, again, like 5 to 7 years, and yeah, written different articles and different books about ketogenic dieting, intermittent fasting, and other biohacks. So I also have like a YouTube channel where I do videos about the same topics. I do some public speaking. I work together with the Biohacker Summit that we talked about, and yeah, that's essentially that I do.
What is it though that like got you interested in this in the first place? Like what is it throughout your life that kind of sparked your interest in biohacking and optimizing your health and sort of making the most of your experience in life here?
I think I was just smart enough to realize that I don't want to make the mistakes of other people, so to say. So I wanted to learn from the mistakes of others right away without having to fail myself. And especially in regards to like health and long term, let's say, happiness and success in life. So I really, in my like, let's say, last year in high school, I started to go into really deep, like personal development, different types of meditation, different types of exercise, nutrition, health, because like I do have like some past family history of like my grandfather's getting some cardiovascular disease. So I didn't want to put my family through those same issues. So I just I grabbed the bull by the horns immediately and started to take like proactive care of my own health and those around me as well. And the same applies to like general, like, let's say, my brand or the kind of work that I do. So I didn't wanted to trade immediate gratification in the form of like, like like the generic I don't want to say anything bad, but the generic teenagers who are just burning their life candle, and just partying, etc., etc. So I just wanted to take, again, like proactive care of those, everything like one of the most important parts of your existence and life, which are like your health, your happiness, your wealth, and yeah, like general success.
I think that's so cool. And can I ask how old you are? I think you mentioned it on a podcast I was watching with Dr. Mercola, but
Yeah,
just
I'm
think
24 at the moment. Yeah.
and that's so cool that at your age that you're so interested in this stuff, because most 24-year-olds are really not super interested in like biohacking and like optimizing their health. It tends to be something that comes a little bit later, like if there's a health scare or something.
Hmm.
in their life. But I can really relate to you because my grandfather died of diabetes, and that was like a huge thing for me in just being aware of my own metabolic health. And I think it's so cool that you're really passionate about this stuff. And this book you made is amazing. I mean, I'm holding it, and it is one heavy book. Like how long did it take you to write this? It's incredible.
Well, I wrote it in like a month or 30 days, but the, let's say, 70% of the material or the research was done before that. So I just had to tie in the chapters and put it together into like a cohesive narrative. So yeah, I've been just researching this topic for quite a while, and it didn't take it. Well, it doesn't take me like a lot of time to produce content because I'm doing it like every day. I'm practicing and doing it consistently. So yeah, I started writing my blog when I was in like first year of college. So yeah, it's been like 5 years since that time. So yeah, I've been writing basically every day. So I don't have like any writer's block, or I don't have it like resistance towards writing.
That's so awesome. Well, the book looks fantastic, and we'll definitely put the link for people to check it out in the show notes. Now, what was your goal with writing this book? And if someone were to take away one thing about fasting and autophagy, what would it be?
Well, the goal was to create this, let's say, user's guide and a practical manual to the process of autophagy, and how do you optimize it for both longevity as well as performance with different methods. And yeah, essentially, best way of activating autophagy, in my opinion, is intermittent fasting and time restricted eating. But there are other ways as well, such as just general exercise and strategically consuming your food and calories. So I think the kind of, let's say, main misconception about autophagy is that it's, once you hear about it the first time, then you think it's like the best thing ever, and like we talked about earlier, that this miracle cure that's gonna fix everything. Well, the truth is that it's not that good in some situations, and you don't want to be activating it chronically. So that's why it's actually much more wiser and better to cycle between periods of higher autophagy and periods where you're not activating it, and where you're actually doing the opposite, where you're suppressing it, as to allow your body to kind of repair itself and to trigger the other beneficial hormones that are the opposite of autophagy. What they are, we can talk about later. But essentially, yeah, like the main point is that autophagy is something that you want to cycle, and I also think that you want to cycle like being in ketosis. So yeah, the main main reason why someone would want to do it is that it's like the fasting and time restricted eating are essentially like so easy ways of healing yourself, easy ways of fixing most of your health issues, and also like promoting your longevity in so doing. So I think like it would be stupid not to take advantage of it, and it doesn't take like a bunch of effort to do it.
Now, what I find really interesting is that you are saying that you can access and turn on autophagy just with intermittent fasting, because I always believe that it was extended fasting of sort of more than a day or more than 17 hours or something that really turned it on, or even longer than that, maybe 2-3 days before you really, like,
Mhm.
if you're in an extended fast, you really switch that on. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about how you can access it just with intermittent fasting, and in a way that, like you said, is sustainable, or maybe shorter term.
Yeah. Well, let's say in truth, it would take a few days of zero calorie intake, or like close to zero calorie intake, to maximize the benefits of autophagy. But those benefits, they tend to reach a point of diminishing returns after, let's say,
Mm.
in my opinion, like about day 3 and day 5 and so on. So you're not going to gain like a significantly bigger boost in autophagy after day 5. But with that being said, there is still some time you need to fast in order to reach that beneficial zone and therapeutic zone. And how fast you're going to reach that depends upon your overall diet, how healthy you are in general, what's your biomarkers, how do you exercise, how physically active you are during the day, how many calories you're eating, etc. So there isn't like a very specific thing that can mark how much autophagy you're getting unless you take like a muscle biopsy, which isn't like that feasible in humans at the moment. So it's going to vary greatly between people, but in general, like someone who is eating some form of a lower carb ketogenic diet that isn't excessively high in carbohydrates and isn't excessively high in protein, then for them they can reach the beneficial effects of autophagy within like a 24-hour period. Granted that they would need to, if they would need to treat something more serious, and then they would probably need to go beyond 24 hours. But like I said earlier, that you don't want to be activating autophagy chronically either. You may want to increase your basal autophagy, which is happening like almost all the time throughout the 24-hour period, but you don't want to necessarily have it activated every day. And the idea of doing some form of intermittent fasting, such as like a 16-8 type of fasting or a 24-hour fast, then that is just to minimize the release of insulin, to minimize being in this anabolic state, and to also increase the basal level of autophagy, where your body is essentially producing more ketones and burning more fat, and as well as just giving your digestion like a short break.
That makes sense. And now, how do you practice your intermittent fasts right now? I'm sure you're always changing things up and trying different modalities, but in general, do you have sort of a regular regimen?
Well, I usually try to eat. Let's say it's I would call it like the warrior diet, which is like Ori Hofmeckler's. We talked about it in my own podcast as well. Like Ori
Yeah.
Hofmeckler's warrior diet, and he recommends fasting about like 20 hours and eating within 4 hours. So that's what I would usually do on a daily basis. And on some other days, like for instance, if I'm not working out, then I will just eat like once a day within 1 to 2 hours. So that's my kind of regular routine that I do. And of course, on some days I will increase the eating window and maybe have like the 16-8 fasting routine where I'll just break my fast at 16 hours and I'll eat maybe like 2 meals within that 8 hour time frame. So I don't rarely I don't really go below 16 hours. So I think the 16-hour mark is probably the minimum for for both like the circadian rhythms as well as like general digestion, and like many other people also agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you practice a daily regimen, and do you do ever longer, sort of 24, 36, or, several days or throughout the
Mm.
year?
Those are ones I do as well quite frequently. Like I maybe have like a 48-hour fast either once or twice a month, and a 3-day fast maybe like once every quarter of the year. But on sometimes it's also be more frequently. For instance, like when I'm traveling, then I don't really want to eat on airplanes, so I'll just fast, and that usually gives me like a 48-hour to 72-hour fast on those like longer flights. So by this time, which is like mid 2019, I've already had like 5 3-day fasts. So yeah, I think I'm pretty good, or like I'm on schedule for for the end of the year, and I'll definitely have like a few ones more, probably like mid summertime, and like later before Christmas or something.
I love how flying is such a fasting hack. Like,
Yeah,
it's so unappetizing
yeah.
to eat the food on the flight that it's just it just makes it easy because there's no like other options really, and the options are limited, and the options they bring you are just not that exciting
Mhm.
or even appetizing sometimes, and it's such a great hack for that. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
and it's also like when you're at home, then it's somewhat harder to fast because you're like in your, let's say, comfort zone, and there's food right in your fridge. So it's much easier to fast when you're like taken out of your comfort zone and put into this like hectic schedule of traveling.
Yeah, you know what I find interesting too is I've noticed that along with this obesity epidemic that we're really dealing with in the Western world, that one of the things that's really changed in our homes is this open concept. You know how the kitchen and the living room are now one, and they used to always be separate rooms.
Mhm.
And that essentially means you're always in the kitchen. Like if you're in the living room, you're always in the kitchen. My office at home is not in its own separate room. So like I'm always in the kitchen, like I'm always in that area. And you don't realize what a subtle kind of shift it is to just
Mhm.
not, whereas our homes used to be more segregated and the kitchen was a place you went into just to prepare food or get food. It wasn't a room that you like sat in
Mhm.
throughout the day or like in the evening. And I think that it's just so interesting how, yeah, it's all about open space and fluidity and everything, but there's got to be some connection too to, overeating and just, constant snacking and all of that, and being like you're always in that space,
Mhm.
mentally, that there isn't that segregation.
Yeah, for sure. Like, if you have junk food in your cupboard right next to you, then you know it's there, and you start you start craving for it. So that's why, like, it's much kind of smarter strategy for someone who is struggling with overeating or some cravings to eliminate those things and to not actually actually not take them into the household, because you're like setting yourself up for failure. And
Yeah.
the same applies to even like healthy food. Like I do have like a freezer with, all this local game and local beef, etc., and fish, but I still try to not have like excess food in my house, just so I could put like more effort into obtaining it, so to say, whether that be going to the farmers market, whether that be just going outside and like actually putting in physical labor to, get it in some shape or form. So it's gonna be much more calorie preserving, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the way it would have been done throughout human history. Ancestrally, if we wanted to get food, we had to go get it. We
Hmm.
had to go work for it and hunt and gather. It wasn't just available in a cold box, in our cave all the time. Definitely an issue with convenience,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I love how Dr. Ben Beekman puts it, like, we're dealing with the plagues of prosperity. It's just so much prosperity, and then, there's these other challenges that arise in that. But I like that you do that. And I find it so funny too how I read that if someone goes into, say, an office and someone in that office brings in donuts, for example, and like puts them in the snack room, that there is a part of you, because of our survival makeup, that is really aware of that there's a high energy source nearby.
Hmm.
And if you're on a diet or you're trying to avoid donuts and things, you have to use a little bit of willpower all day while you're there to not go in and have one, especially if like your coworkers are indulging and eating, and that puts like a strain on your willpower all day just because they're
Hmm.
there and you're actively having to resist them. So just to your point, not having any of that food at home is just going to make it easier because it'll drain your willpower less,
Yeah.
you know, not even knowing that that's in the house. And that's tougher for people who have families who are like not doing low carb
Hmm.
or, this kind of thing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we talked about on my on when I talk with you on my podcast, is that you, when you're in ketosis and you become metabolically flexible, then you also achieve this freedom of mind, that you don't emotionally crave for those junk food because you're kind of over it. You're over those things, and you actually prefer to stay in this mentally clear state where you're not craving those things, and you're like not, let's say, addicted.
Yes, and it's so timely that you brought this up because I'm just giving up my last thing right now, which is dark
Hmm.
chocolate, 100% dark chocolate. And I found that I would fixate on it.
Hmm.
And yet, in the past, when I gave up sugar, I gave up sweeteners, I gave up smoking, like all these things at the time when I was giving them up. It was so hard to even imagine my life without sugar, without sweeteners, without smoking. Like I couldn't even imagine it. It was just so hard. And yet now, I don't think about them. Like they don't even enter my
Hmm.
consciousness. It's not something where I'm like every day, like, oh, I wish I could smoke and like have a sweet treat. Like it doesn't even occur to me because I'm so much more engaged just in
Hmm.
life. And like I've been noticing that too with the dark chocolate now, that just like you said, that clarity of purpose, that I'm not distracted in the day. I can work for hours on writing and creative projects and podcasting, and it's just not even, there's a point where it's no longer a part of who you are. And I find that actually going back to fasting has really helped me do so many things in addition to autophagy, including like resetting my
Hmm.
palate to more savory and being able to enjoy foods more without them having to be so processed and
Hmm.
hyper palatable. Have you ever noticed that at all for yourself?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I already experienced that same effect when I was going keto. But yeah, when the fasting will definitely like make it, or it's gonna emphasize this effect. And I feel that fasting is not only helping you to overcome like sugar addictions and also like resetting your palate, but it also just helps you to not be that attached to any kind of food. Like literally, you don't like, especially doing these longer fasts. Like I, when I'm on day 3 or something, then I could eat like literally a piece of lettuce or like just a regular, I don't know, cold piece of liver or something, and I would be incredibly grateful for it and incredibly satiated from it as well. So definitely, like you just when you're fasting, your or like regular food becomes just so much more appealing, and the other, let's say, the mental clarity and everything else related to that is just phenomenal.
Yes, I think to me, this is one of the biggest benefits I've gotten out of fasting is just resetting my hunger and satiety and my palate, because when your tongue is used to all these hyper palatable foods, like I remember when I was a kid and my dad made
Mhm.
liver, I thought it was the most atrocious thing that I had ever tasted in my life. And I think at the time, I was eating a lot of candy and junk food and all this hyper palatable food that this was like beyond tasteless to me. And now when I eat it, it's absolutely delicious. Like it's even better when I make it into
Mhm.
pate, but I find it so delicious. I find just eggs
Yeah.
to be so sweet and like like just delicious. And the other thing is it helps you to know, like Kelly Hogan told me this great quote, hunger is the best
Mm.
sauce. Like it helps you to know if a regular plain piece of food doesn't taste good to you, then you probably aren't actually
Mm.
hungry. Like just plain fish or eggs or steak with maybe a little bit of salt and pepper should taste
Mm.
phenomenal, you know? And I think that that's such a cool thing about fasting, and I love that you've experienced that
Mm.
too.
Yeah, I think like just most people, they want to use food as like entertainment, and just they want to have every meal to be like these fireworks and sparkling and unicorns and everything else. So I think it shouldn't be that, like, of course, like eating delicious food is amazing, and it's beneficial not only for health but also like just social interactions, etc. But yeah, every meal doesn't have to be like this magnificent party in your mouth, in a sense that
Right.
you can actually just eat some blander food, simpler foods, as a almost like a chore, so to say, to give yourself some form of nutrition that your body needs. And especially like in the example of organ meats, etc. I'm a huge fan of organ meats. I've been eating them, yeah, for
Mhm.
like several years. Yeah, it's just so nutrient dense, and most people, they tend to like get disgusted by them, but I actually enjoy them.
Yeah, and I think that just comes back down to being like really spoiled by our hyper palatable environment of, all this industry being behind selling us food that they try to make as delicious as possible. And it totally disconnects you from what real food tastes like. And for me, every time I eat a meal, I'm always hungry. When I eat, I'm always so satisfied by it, and it tastes amazing. And it's really plain food, like, and yet it's real food, and that's how I really can be connected to hunger and
Mhm.
satiety. And it's so cool that the body, it talks to us all the time, and yet we're not
Mhm.
listening,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I don't know, something about autophagy, like, and fasting, it just helps reconnect,
I think like a
with,
lot of the, let's say, your taste preferences and cravings are caused or influenced by the state of your microbiome. So we know, we at least we have some evidence to show that just eating sugar and carbohydrates, that and essentially promotes these bacterial strains that are also craving, that are making you crave more sugar and carbohydrates. So it's like a vicious feedback loop, that the more you eat them, the more you start to crave those things, and especially that's going to structure your palate accordingly. And one funny thing is that when you're all fasting, then your microbiome is also going to balance itself out and it's going to achieve this optimal diversity by itself. So it's all, again, like an example of self-organization that happens inside your body. So you would think that when you're fasting, then you're going to starve the microbiome, but the opposite actually happens, that the microbiome essentially becomes more functional and diversifies itself.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. I'd love to know more about that. I remember coming across some research about the different microbiome strands, and there's so much we don't know
Mhm.
about it. And that certain bacteria, like I don't know if it was the Firmicutes or Bacteroides, that if one of them is dominant, it makes you crave
Mhm.
different foods. So
I think, yeah,
that's really,
I think
really
like
cool.
obese people tend to have more bacteroides, and lean people
Right.
have the other, or like I'm not sure exactly. I can't remember which one was which, but essentially, like one strain of bacteria predominates in obese people, and the leaner people have the other one. So yeah.
That I just think that's absolutely fascinating, especially with learning that going even like very low carb and keto, it really shifts the microbiome so much. You know, especially I was talking to Dr. Paul Mason about, you know, he's a carnivore
Mhm.
physician who studies cholesterol and digestion, and he was saying how your microbiome can completely die off from the kind that's eating sort of plants and digesting plants for you and be entirely new from like just eating more protein and fat and animal foods. And it's just so interesting. Like I wish we knew more. We're just kind of on the leading edge of learning.
Now, with that goal of having optimal quality of life in mind, and I define quality of life by the absolute amount of joy that you feel experiencing life, I created something called the 28-Day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. It's the best product that I could possibly create in order to help as many people as possible try keto out for themselves, get into nutritional ketosis or ketogenesis, and become fat fueled. So that's why I created the 28-day challenge. And it's a program that comes with my meal plans, which are 4 weeks, about 28 days of meal plans. And in there you have shopping lists, full guide to getting into ketosis, testing for ketosis, which is optional if you want to do that. But the coolest thing about it is it also comes with my unlimited support and coaching. So I added this in after I had first created the program because I realized that so many of us have questions when we're starting out a brand new way of life, a new lifestyle. Not only do we have lots of questions, but we also need to have a lot of support. And so I created the 20-day challenge because we have a community in there of others who've done the program already, who've gone through it and love being there, love helping out and supporting other people who are joining. And then I'm also there answering your common questions, answering anything that comes to mind while you're trying this out. Do you want to substitute something in the meal plan for something else? Do you want to find a recipe for a certain specific event? Do you want to find what my recommendations would be for ordering off a menu at a certain restaurant? I'm there to help guide you. I know some of these are different kinds of requests, but I'm there to support you in any kind of question that you have doing keto. I love to provide explanations of how different processes work in the body, why ketogenesis works. I love to share any kind of insight and information that I can. And I'm there to be your guide, to be your support. Studies have shown that we get to our goals so much more easily and faster when we have a guide, when we have a friend, a coach, a support person keeping us accountable, keeping us motivated, excited. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm excited to help you get to your goals, get to your best health, because I have never been happier living and enjoying my life and being in my body. I've never had so much body confidence, so much strength, so much zest and excitement for life. And I love helping people experience that for themselves too. You can see dozens and dozens of success stories posted on my different feeds on Instagram, on Ketogenic Girl. There's a section called Success Stories and Testimonials, and you can read through so many different successes that people have had doing the challenge. So I would love to have you join the challenge. Give it a try. There are other options too that can be added on and layered on during the program, I have my phase 2 higher protein plans. If you're looking to build more muscle after you've started keto with the 28-day ones, I have build your day ones, no cook plans. I have vegetarian ones. I have all kinds of different versions and add-ons for later on if you decide that you are continuing at this. But what have you got to lose other than stored body fat? Use it for fuel, optimize your health and your body composition today, and go check out the 28-day Ketogenic Girl Challenge at ketogenicgirl.com. Now, onto our show.
Yeah, like there is definitely some research showing that obese person, someone who is overweight, they tend to have more firmicutes, which are associated with a higher body mass index and general poorer metabolic health, whereas someone who has more of the bacteria called bacteroides, then they tend to be leaner. And I think that the microbiome is like directly influencing not only how you metabolize food, but also like how does your body process those calories as well, because there are certain, let's say quote unquote bad bacteria that can also help you to extract more calories from the food that you're eating. So it's like a vicious cycle in a sense that if you have poor gut health, then it's also not only going to enforce, let's say, sugar cravings and more hunger, but also you're just predisposed to be getting more obese just because you have these obese bacteria that are causing those issues. So definitely going through some form of like, let's say, complete reset in your gut can be useful for most people in the sense of promoting the beneficial bacteria as well as not feeding the bad ones, because sugar is known to be kind of enforcing the proliferation of these bad bacteria. And likewise, things like fermented foods and low inflammatory, let's say, whole foods with enough of these polyphenols as well as fiber, those can be somewhat beneficial for promoting the balancing of these healthy bacteria. And the same applies to fasting as well. Like when you are fasting, then you would think that you're kind of wiping out all of your bacteria in your gut, and you're actually harming the microbiome. But the truth is that when you're fasting, then your body will, or your microbiome will, start to self-organize itself, and it's essentially going to wipe out the bad ones itself, and the healthy ones will survive, because it's almost like the microbiome itself is like a separate entity almost, that's kind of separate from your human body, if that sense. It's a part of it, but it kind of operates based upon its own let's say processes. And with fasting, you're kind of giving the right signal that allows the microbiome to reorganize itself based upon what it wants and what's like optimal for proper gut health. So fasting, I think fasting itself directly, it's not going to replenish your digestive enzymes. It more of like gives the body a break from using those digestive enzymes, and in so doing, you're just kind of recharging the functionality of your organs, digestive organs, gut, and in so doing, the digestive enzymes will also get just replenished, because like we already said before, that the body is smart enough to heal itself. We just need to, remove the barriers and kind of get out of our own way, because, the more you stimulate the usage of certain digestive enzymes, etc., then the more you're going to be depleting them, in a sense, especially if your food isn't that rich in those digestive enzymes by itself, like just old food, worn out food, overcooked food, and generally processed food. They are very low in those digestive enzymes. And that's why, making sure that your food is like full of, it's more like fresh and less cooked, it's generally better for digestion and preserving more of the digestive enzymes. And in this sense, the time restricted eating itself is again another example of why it's so beneficial and optimal for almost like the original way of eating by humans.
Well, that makes sense. You're just kind of in the post-absorptive state all the time and undergoing repair. Yeah. So based on all your research, do you find that the optimal way of getting the most benefits from fasting for autophagy is doing this like daily short 4-hour eating window with 20 hours of fasting? I mean, that adds up to about 140 hours a week, that you're fasting. It's quite a lot. And then just eating really nutrient dense food sort of in that eating window, and then doing occasional, maybe once a month or every few months, doing like a 1, 2, or 3 day fast.
So, there is no real optimal amount of fasting that applies to everyone, and there probably isn't like this best fasting routine that everyone should follow for the rest of life, etc. It's very like context dependent, and it varies quite a lot between people, and it depends upon like how physically active they are, how many calories they have to eat, what's their general metabolic health, what's their goals, and like what's their particular situation. So if someone is trying to, let's say, lose a bit of more body fat, then they can definitely go through these longer extended fasts more frequently, as to just create a larger caloric deficit more faster. And on the other hand, someone who has like some goals for muscle growth, then they just naturally won't be able to pull it off that easily, and naturally they would just want to fast less often, as well as maybe potentially increase their eating window. But for like the average person, as well as from the perspective of circadian rhythms and general like optimal health, I think some form of daily time restricted eating is still something that we should all stick to. And even like many other researchers in this field, like Dr. Sachin Panda and Dr. Mercola, they also agree that most people should, or like they think that humans are meant to eat their calories within like 8 to 10 hours at minimum. And yeah, I also think that fasting for 16 hours at least every day, that's probably like a very optimal strategy, and it's not like it doesn't take much effort, and it's somewhat easy to do. And like the amount of benefit you get from just that small time restriction, that is like a huge net positive effect. And yeah, I think that at minimum people should stick to the 16 and 8 method, and then increase their fasting window by based upon a goal. Like if someone just like to do OMAD or 1 meal a day, or they like to do the warrior diet, then yeah, go ahead. You will probably maybe get like a little bit of more of these fasting benefits during the fasted window, but at the same time it can't be that myopic, in the sense that if you're just fasting and not optimizing your other nutrition aspects, then it doesn't mean that you're healthier, so to say, just because you're fasting. So it always has to be taken into within the context of a holistic lifestyle, like how much you're sleeping, what your exercise, and what kind of foods are you actually eating, and also like paying attention to the actual results in terms of body composition, hormonal health, mental well-being, and biomarkers, so to say. So if all of your biomarkers are going worse, then you're probably doing something wrong, and vice versa. Like if everything is just is improving and you're feeling awesome, then yeah, you don't have to change a whole lot. Like it may be somewhat of a rabbit hole to go down into thinking that, okay, at the moment I'm doing 16 and 8, everything is awesome, I'm feeling amazing, I'm getting great results, I'm losing fat. But then you start to deliberately change it up because you think something can be better, and you actually may end up feeling worse. So yeah, again, like assessing your subjective well-being as well as objective data from your blood tests, etc. Those are one of the things to pay attention to when it comes to like what kind of strategy in terms of my nutrition and health should I actually do.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. Now, a lot of the people that I interact with, they have kind of broken metabolisms in some way. And I know that, I mean, the metabolism never really breaks. Your metabolic processes are always ongoing, but some people will have an adaptive response to eating, lower calories. Are there certain things that people can do with fasting to enhance or rev their metabolism? I've read Dr. Jason Fung talk about how fasting increases and boosts the metabolism because you're forcing the body to go into autophagy, and then there's more cellular work happening.
So, like, fasting itself isn't going to like slow down your metabolism or destroy it, because the body is very adaptable, and it's actually somewhat beneficial for breaking certain, let's say, fat loss plateaus. And there are some studies showing that fasting increases metabolic rate actually after like 48 hours or such by up to 3 to 14%. So I think the reason it does so is because of shifting into ketosis, getting like this sort of a new stimuli in terms of like, okay, we're kind of forced to start using our own backup stores, as well as these increased somewhat increased stress response that you experience, because like cortisol, it does help with fat mobilization, and adrenaline as well. So just people may just start to be more, fidgety in the sense that they start to burn more calories just because of that as well. But at the same time, like if you are doing intermittent fasting for fat loss, then the main kind of goal should always be to try to eat as many calories as you can while still losing weight at a consistent pace, because metabolic adaptation, or a slow metabolism, that happens primarily because of like just eating fewer calories overall, and your body gets used to burning less calories. So you can definitely eat a whole lot of food within a smaller time frame with like intermittent fasting, but it won't slow down your metabolism because you're still consuming a whole lot of calories. And vice versa, if you're eating, let's say, a very small amount of calories, like 1,000 calories per day, but you spread it out across the entire day, then that will inherently slow down your metabolism, because not because of the like increased meal frequency, but because you're just eating fewer calories. So most of the thermic effect of food is tied to the actual macronutrients and what kind of calories are you eating during that feeding window. And fasting may potentially slow down your metabolism only if you start to spontaneously eat fewer calories. Like a lot of people, they find it somewhat difficult to fit in like a whole lot of their daily calories within like an hour or two. But yeah, like it's at the same time, it can be somewhat useful for like actually losing weight, because you'll just eat less. But if you're feeling that your metabolism is slowing down, then you just have to be more mindful of how many calories are you actually eating and could it be that you're just spontaneously eating very few calories and you're under eating, which itself is the actual cause of a slower metabolism, not fasting.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating that it makes so much more sense to eat a lot more sort of calories and nutrient dense foods in a small window than to just be perpetually eating small amounts like a rabbit. And yet that's really what is recommended all the time for people to lose weight and get in shape. And I suffered for years taking bad advice from like magazines and things that were media saying, just eat 6 to 8 times a day, tiny little meals of like 100, 200 calories. And it's sad. Like there's even, there's whole industries built around, I see these things pop up sometimes on my feed or on the ads and stuff, and it's like this 100 calorie like shake that you can have, and you're supposed to have these like 5 or 6 times a day. And yeah, like you said, you're perpetually in the absorptive state, the fed state, and you're always going to be breaking down food that's coming in. And yet, like you said, it's low calorie, so it's like your metabolism is going to down regulate and adapt to take the most energy that it can out of that small amount of nutrition. And I see it all the time that people really have like really slowed metabolism, and they have to go into a surplus for a while. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. I think you mentioned, like, I don't know if you called it reverse dieting, or you talked about suppressing autophagy and cycling through those kinds of phases.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, you don't really want to have autophagy activated all the time, and you definitely don't want to be fasting all the time either, because like fasting and autophagy, they're like catabolic stressors. The catabolic meaning that they're breaking down your body and they're causing more stress in terms of like using the nutrients that are stored in your body. And the opposite to that is anabolism, or being anabolic, which is like building up and growing. And the main fuel signaling pathway that regulates anabolism is mTOR, or mechanistic target of rapamycin. And mTOR is the body's main growth switch that promotes muscle growth, cell proliferation, cell survival, DNA repair, nerve growth, etc. So everything that is growing is regulated by mTOR. And when mTOR is elevated, then autophagy gets suppressed, because the two things, they cannot really coexist. So your body is always prioritizing one or the other. And the idea is that while you're fasting, then you're suppressing mTOR, you're suppressing insulin, you're suppressing all these growth pathways, as to allow the body to repair or self-heal itself, thanks to, or like, take out the trash, etc., self-heal itself with autophagy, release stem cells, etc. But in order for those benefits to take fully effect, then you actually need to stimulate anabolism as well, and you want to shut down autophagy as to allow the body to go into repair mode and actually use those benefits. So a good example is that the stem cells, they get released during the fasting window, but to actually go for the stem cells to go into the right places and start growing new cells or replacing the old cells, they need mTOR as well, and they need insulin. So you should never think of, when you're breaking a fast, how can I prolong the fast further and how can I stay within a fasted state, because that's inherently keeping the body more catabolic, and that's just gonna eventually lead to a slower metabolism. But on the other hand, if you do cycle between fasting and then feasting, quote unquote, by activating mTOR and consuming enough nutrient-dense foods, then you're allowing your body to achieve this optimal balance between growth and repair. So yeah, mTOR itself is very important for like muscle growth as well as a general vitality, in a sense. Without mTOR, you would really just fade away and die eventually, because it's just required for cellular survival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're definitely blaming the wrong source with that. I definitely agree. And with mTOR, you're saying that that's basically a good thing to stimulate. Is that mostly for muscle synthesis and building muscle?
Yeah, mTOR is required for muscle hypertrophy and muscle growth and promoting like strength gains, but at the same time, mTOR is needed for everything else as well, like your brain cells and just general longevity, so to say. If you suppress mTOR for too long and chronically, then your body will start to degrade and wane away, which you see on some of these very restrictive diets, like very low calorie diets as well as very low protein diets. They both have this effect over the long term, where the chronic suppression of mTOR and insulin just leads to muscle loss as well as just general weakness.
Right, like you want some recycling of incorrectly folded proteins and damaged organelles to be recycled, but not your healthy proteins. And that's something that I don't think is discussed enough. Is one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you today, is to talk about kind of the dark side of too much autophagy and how it can be a net negative if someone is over fasting, is doing too much fasting all the time. And I think that it could be sort of a pitfall that people in the biohacking or keto community might fall into, because, we're all like, we all feel so many benefits from doing these different interventions, and you think, well, more must always be better. But with fasting, more is not always better, correct?
Yeah, like that's one of the main kind of premises of my book as well, is that you don't want to have autophagy activated all the time, because it has quite a few negative side effects. And in addition to just general muscle loss and sarcopenia, there's also the thing that autophagy may, in some cases, promote the survival of cancer cells and malignant tumors. So autophagy itself isn't like a bad thing, or it's not a good thing either. It's quite like a neutral mechanism that your cells use to recycle different organelles and cellular components. But so there isn't any like objective consciousness deciding which cells need to survive and which cells deserve to die. So it's somewhat of a nuanced point, and it's very difficult to kind of distinguish or target certain, let's say, cells, especially like malignant cells, to die with autophagy. Autophagy is just like a cellular process that is happening almost all the time, and it kind of directs the body in some direction. And the main reason why autophagy may promote the survival of these malignant cells is that it's a hormetic stressor, and hormetic stressors make the body stronger and tougher against all kinds of stressors. So it's carries over into every aspect, so to say. So if you're fasting, you'll also be able to tolerate more heat because they stimulate the similar metabolic pathways. And likewise, with autophagy, you're making your cells stronger, and your cancer cells are a part of you, so they're all gaining those same benefits. And in some situations, it's thought that autophagy itself would be better for actual disease prevention instead of like treatment, because you're preventing your healthy cells from getting sick in the first place thanks to the disease preventative mechanisms. But at the same time, if you're already sick, then there are other strategies that you should also implement in addition to just fasting, because the cancer cells itself may be somewhat tricky to completely break down, and it's a very complex situation, and I don't think there is enough research about it yet. But yeah, some studies show that, at least in animal studies, autophagy in some situations, it doesn't like grow cancer cells, it doesn't feed the cancer cells, it just promotes their fitness and basically makes them tougher against future stressors.
Yeah, and just for someone, the average person who is just looking to partake in some autophagy in order to improve their metabolic health, and all of these different strategies and benefits that we talked about, is there a risk for the average person to be sort of strengthening some of these cells as well, and like to be careful not to overdo the fasting?
For actual resources to find, then I think PubMed is a very good place to like look into studies about both fasting as well as autophagy. There isn't like a whole lot of specific studies in humans, but I think that like certain like specific illnesses and ailments can be covered in that sense. In the book, I cover more like how do you find the optimal balance between both mTOR and autophagy. So I do cover a lot of the science, a lot of the physiology and the mechanisms, but it's also like a very practical guide to actually implementing these things and making sure that you get the right dose without overstimulating either pathway, and making sure that you're not deficient of both either.
Like, how does a person figure out kind of the right amount of autophagy where it's a net positive as opposed to being potentially strengthening like cells that are not good for the body?
I think the average person doesn't really have to like worry about overstimulating autophagy or fasting too much, because like I said, the autophagy can be very useful for disease prevention. And if you're already like healthy and you don't have any signs of disease, then you're just making yourself healthier and making yourself tougher as well. So I would only be worried about if your biomarkers and your health, well-being, everything else tends to go downward and you're actually experiencing a decrease in your health. Then I would be somewhat cautious in the sense of just being more careful with what you're doing and being more, let's say, curious about it as well. So some people may just stick to a certain way of eating, a certain diet, a certain way of exercising, or a certain way of just general lifestyle, just because they're so used to it and they're afraid of, changing their routines. So it's always very important to make sure that your routines don't begin to dictate yourself, that you are the one who is dictating your routines, and the same applies to your diet. You don't want to make your diet an ideology. You want to always follow the principle of what's best for me in this situation, and be willing to change your approach like in real time. But yeah, most people, if they're doing some form of like daily time restricted eating, like the 16 and 8 or the warrior diet or OMAD, then they're probably not there's no reason to be worried about overactivating autophagy, because you're not getting like a significant amount of autophagy either. You need to be actually fasting for quite a longer time, like over 24 hours, to get like this very substantial boost in this pathway, so to say. So in most cases, you're not going to be overstimulating it as long as you're not having like these back-to-back very long fasts all the time, and you're like constantly losing muscle and feeling weaker and actually losing the health.
Yeah, I just find it interesting because I've heard different things about how sort of everyone has tumor cells in their bodies, and I haven't looked into this enough personally to know about it, but it does sound like just overall autophagy does such a great job at recycling parts of the cell that have broken down, and the other counterpart to that is really nourishing the body well. So what are some things that you kind of emphasize in terms of your nutrient intake, and what's your diet kind of like? I know you do OMAD kind of warrior style, but what do you do, more of like a ketogenic diet most of the time?
My own diet is most of the time it's ketogenic, but it's not like strict keto. I do have, let's say, high quality animal foods, eggs, fish, meat, organ meats, and some vegetables and berries, but I do also incorporate like periodic carbohydrate refeeds, where I'm actually eating like the opposite of keto. I'm eating high carbs, low fat, and like still leaner protein, so to say. So I think a more cyclical approach is very beneficial for metabolic flexibility, as well as just improved microbial diversity, and I feel better as well from physical performance, in the sense of cycling between those different fuel sources, and making sure that I stay keto adapted while still being able to eat carbs, and I don't feel and that I won't go into these negative side effects of keto flu again, just because of eating a bit of more carbs on some days. So I've been able to maintain like a very good level of metabolic flexibility, and I can eat almost any type of food without feeling worse after eating it, and I don't feel worse the next day either. And yeah, I'm feeling phenomenal in terms of like physical performance and mental well-being as well during the day.
That's really cool. And is your objective, like, are you optimizing for just overall optimal health and longevity? Do you pursue being in ketogenesis like actively?
I'm not worried about like being in ketosis, because I'm already doing daily intermittent fasting, and during the fast state I'm inevitably going to be in ketosis and using ketones for fuel. So my goal itself with eating keto isn't to be in ketosis, and I think most people, they don't need to do it unless they have like epilepsy or something. My goal is to just promote keto adaptation, as well as just keep lower levels of insulin, keep my blood sugar stable, to not overstimulate mTOR, etc., be more insulin sensitive, and to dip into autophagy on a more frequent basis. So those are my kind of goals. I want to prioritize like health and longevity, but I do implement the performance side, and making sure that I build muscle and maintain it, as well as just being more metabolically flexible, and not having to like be scared of any particular type of food, and being able to eat basically whatever I want.
Yeah, I mean, some people find there's a benefit to the therapeutic sort of applications of ketones. Like, there's some research suggesting that the brain and heart may actually prefer ketones to glucose, and that ketones are actually signaling molecules just like our other endocrine hormones. And so there's all these cool things. There's, anti-inflammatory effects of ketones. And, I think there's probably reasons for people to also want to have ketones being produced like most of the time.
Yeah, like ketones do have many health benefits, and they are like anti-inflammatory. They're a great fuel source for the brain, as well as just they've been shown to increase lifespan in some rodents, I believe. And but the main point is that in order to reap those benefits, then you don't need a whole lot of ketones, and you don't need to be chronically in ketosis all the time either. Like when you are eating, then it doesn't matter if you get kicked out of ketosis for a short period of time, as long as you practice some form of intermittent fasting and time restricted eating, because during the fast state, that's, I believe, like where you're supposed to be going into more deeper ketosis. And it's good if you are able to maintain it with food, but at the same time, it's not a problem if you're kicking yourself out of ketosis in the short term either, because your body, if your body is metabolically flexible, then you can definitely gain those ketones back, and you'll just go back into ketosis faster. Because chronic ketosis itself, I don't think that we're supposed to be in ketosis 24/7 for the rest of our life, and that doesn't really happen in a real world scenario, because it's too easy to get kicked out of ketosis even by just eating a little bit of too much protein or just having a bit of extra carbs. So yeah, the goal isn't ketosis all the time. The goal is cyclical ketosis, to again go back into the idea of cycling between mTOR as well as autophagy. So that's I think that's how supposed to be balanced out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So what is your favorite restaurant meal?
My favorite restaurant meal, I think it would be just like a really good T-bone steak or a ribeye, because although I do consume quite a lot of adequate amount of beef and meat on a daily basis, I would prefer to have like these bone broth parts and gelatinous tissue and these collarbones, etc., for a better fat ratio, as well as the other micronutrients that you don't get from just lean meat. So when I would be going to eat outside, then I would just take advantage of having like a good steak or something like that, because I don't have it like that frequently on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about this because I see some quotes sometimes from, I spend a lot of time in Europe and in Prague, and so I kind of see different sides of the whole biohacking movement, and how certain biohackers in Europe kind of find it humorous that in North America, we call like cold immersion and like going to the sauna like biohacking, and you're like, that's just life, like that's just what we do. We just go to the sauna, and it's a part of our lifestyle. And I noticed that here in Prague, people just go to the sauna all the time. They have sauna clubs. A lot of people have memberships to the saunas, and you don't call it biohacking. It's just part of your kind of lifestyle. And there's certain things that you, I think, have kind of retained here that we're rediscovering in the West.
Yeah, like definitely the taking a sauna or taking an ice bath, it's not really biohacking if you're living in these parts of the world, like Finland and Eastern Europe and those kinds of countries. I would say that we probably have just retained those traditions because there hasn't been that big of an influence of modernity, and we haven't had like this huge influx of American culture, so to say, especially in like Estonia. Like Estonia has been, it was under the Soviet Union rule for like a long time, and we just regained our independence in the 1990s. So we haven't had like a influence of American culture that much, and the people in these parts of the world are probably more in tune with nature. They're closer to nature, as well as they just have somewhat tougher lives. Like there's more physical activity, there's no more physical labor, and people are just more kind of stuck to a traditional way of living, whether that be growing their own food, whether that be riding more like a bike, spending more time outside, gardening, taking a sauna, building their house, etc. So people are somewhat more, more like ancestral way of living, or like a traditional rural country, like a farmers' countries are these most parts of the world.
Yes, absolutely. Now, what are you working on next? What can we look out for from you? What are you kind of excited about right now?
At the moment, I am writing or thinking of writing my next book as well, which is going to be about primarily daily rituals and circadian rhythms. But I am still refining the art and science of autophagy and intermittent fasting, constantly kind of researching about it and writing new articles. And probably I will have like some form of a revised version of my current book Metabolic Adaptation as well, because there's so much research coming out all the time, and my own opinions about the topic may also change. So definitely I'm willing to change certain of my opinions, as well as change my approach constantly. So I think probably I'll have it revised within a few months to just add like a few cool new research about general importance of autophagy, as well as the other mechanisms of how it actually is so central to almost optimal health, like preventing heart disease, lowering inflammation, preventing neurodegeneration, etc. So I'll just refine it a little bit and add a few cool tricks and a few cool new findings into the book. But at the moment the book is already available. Then I will also have another video course coming out about sleep optimization, because in addition to eating too much, most people in the West, they tend to sleep too little, and that is another like really critical part to accelerate aging. And sleep deprivation causes a whole lot of metabolic issues, a whole lot of neurodegeneration, and just depression, and a whole very, very like poor quality of life. So I want to kind of create this course to give people a guide on how to actually optimize and improve their sleep, because I think it's somewhat underrated.
That's awesome. And what are 3 tips you could leave our audience with about fasting?
The 3 tips I can give about fasting, they would be: number 1, try, focus on your sleep more, because sleep deprivation is probably worse than not fasting. And like a lot of the benefits of fasting, come from improved sleep quality, as well as not eating too close to bedtime. So definitely, like if you stop eating by about 4 to 5 hours before going to bed, then you'll probably see like some improvements in your sleep. And generally, if your sleep is more fixed, then you'll have more energy to do everything else, and you'll be able to burn more fat and build more muscle and just have more energy during the day. The second tip would be to not be addicted to coffee, because that's something that most intermittent fasters, they tend to develop. Like they compensate the lack of food by just drinking more coffee and being stimulated by other things. So that's definitely not worth it, and it's all gonna jeopardize the benefits of the fast. So I wouldn't drink any more than 1 to 2 cups of coffee a day, and making sure that it's not gonna disrupt your sleep quality or such. The third tip I would give is to try to build lean muscle as well, because fasting is a catabolic stressor, and if you're just fasting without any form of resistance exercise, then eventually you're just losing your muscle tissue, because there's no stimulus for maintaining muscle. So muscle mass is incredibly vital for longevity and preventing all age-related diseases, but it's also just going to make it easier for you to actually lose weight and maintain a leaner body composition. So just fasting or just doing cardio isn't going to give you like the lean physique that most people are after. You actually have to implement resistance exercise and making sure that you stimulate the muscle, consume enough protein, and generally focus on sleep quality to repair the tissues. So again, sleep, resistance training, fasting, and not being somewhat stimulated by all these different stimulants, whether that be coffee or social media or even just general stress.
That's exactly what I do. I have like 1 cup a day, and afternoon I'm just like, nope, because it has that like a long half-life. Well, those are really great tips. And where can people find your book? And we'll definitely put that in the show notes. So where can people find your book and follow you online? What are kind of your more active feeds?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast, Vanessa. And if people want to learn more about the book Metabolic Autophagy and intermittent fasting, then they can check it out on Amazon. It's Metabolic Autophagy by Siim. And on the social media platforms, I'm also Siim, Siim Land. that's both on Instagram and YouTube, Siim Land. And yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. Well, Siim, thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of your knowledge and information about autophagy. You've done a beautiful book, Metabolic Autophagy, and really contributed a lot, I think, to the knowledge that our community will have about autophagy. And I really acknowledge you for that and putting in so much work and effort. You make amazing videos and you put out such great content. And, everyone really responds so well to put out what you put out there and can see how much love and just research and work you put into all of that. So, congratulations on the book. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us here today on the show.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being here today and tuning in. I would like to invite you to check out the 20-Day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. A lot of the things that we talked about on today's episode, I find are really solved by doing a ketogenic meal plan like the one that I designed, the 20-Day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. And a lot of that comes down to having someone already calculate everything for you, having the macros all dialed in for you, having this meal plan with all the portions already outlined for you. It really helps address a lot of the portion control issues, and having everything calculated already really helps with preparation and doing batch prep. A lot of people on the challenge will pick out a day, say on Saturday or Sunday, and they'll meal prep ahead for the week, and they'll pick 2 or 3 days from the plan that they love, and they'll repeat it, such as day 5, which has the burger with my special keto burger sauce, and repeat that. And you can do that as many times as you like, and it really makes preparation and following keto and the meal plans a lot easier, and doing that batch prepping and meal prep on the weekend. And the meal plans also come with a shopping list. They come with a full guide to testing yourself for ketosis. And the best part is they include my support and coaching in our members Facebook group, which is an awesome community. I love being in there, and it really helps so much having other people doing this program with you and alongside, and people who've done it already and successfully reached their goals there to inspire you and to support you. And having that community built in is so important. Our success rates go way, way up when we're doing any kind of diet or lifestyle change when we have a buddy. And I'm here to be your buddy, to be your guide and help you with your journey, because you can post any questions that you have about keto, about the meal plans, about low carb, and I am there to answer your questions and to support you as you go. And I just think it makes such a big difference to have a coach and a support group and a supportive community around you. So check out the 20-Day Ketogenic Girl Challenge. Just a word of caution, there is another 20-day keto challenge that's being sold. It is not mine. I only sell my program from ketogenicgirl.com. So if you see a link to that, it's a copycat version that has kind of popped up in the last year. It also has a similar name, 20-Day Ketogenic Challenge. But if you are looking for my program, which comes with my support and coaching, you can only get it from ketogenicgirl.com, and make sure that you are purchasing the one from me, because I have some people who have purchased this other program thinking that it's my program, and the coaching and support is not included because it's not the program that I formulated and that has had so much success. If you want to read and check out some of the success stories, you can go to ketogenicgirl.com and click on testimonials and reviews or success stories, and you can read some of the dozens and dozens of success stories of people who have done the challenge. And if you join the program, you'll get to interact with so many of those people in the group who've had real success and are there to share tips and tricks for making all of this so much easier and so much fun. So check out the 20-Day Ketogenic Girl Challenge at ketogenicgirl.com. And until the next episode, I hope you have a fat-fueled rest of your day.
A few disclaimers. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice, as I am not a qualified healthcare provider. The information presented on this podcast is for educational purposes only. Ketogenic Girl is not qualified to provide medical advice. Consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to this podcast. Prior to beginning a ketogenic diet, you should undergo a full health screening with your physician to confirm that a keto diet is suitable for you and to rule out any conditions or contraindications that may pose risk or that are incompatible with a ketogenic diet. A keto diet may or may not be appropriate for you if you have any kind of health condition, whether known to you or unknown, so you must consult your physician to find this out. Anyone under the age of 18 should consult with their physician and their parents or legal guardian.